Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Upside Daily Sports Update. August 7th, every day at 10 o'clock, we're going to update guys on the latest sports storylines from around the NBA, NFL, MLB, and the NHL. So without further ado, let's get right into it anyway. Right off the top, the NFL making the biggest news of the day with trade requests, of course, for Jimmy Garoppolo of the 49ers and Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns. Let's start with Jimmy Garoppolo. The fact is there's not a lot of teams in on the market for Jimmy Garoppolo right now. At the beginning of the offseason, it was long expected that Jimmy Garoppolo would no longer be a member of the 49ers. Of course, he had the shoulder injury and needed to have shoulder surgery. That's why he wasn't traded ahead of the draft. Teams wanted to see how he would recover. Now that he has recovered, he's in training camp with the 49ers. We'll see how that injury continues to progress. The 49ers do have their first preseason game on Friday, so we'll see if he participates in that one. But it seems like the 49ers are going to have to hold on to him until cut-down day. That seems to be the latest coming from Ian Rappaport today. The other big trade news out of the NFL is Kareem Hunt. He has formally requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns after being unsuccessful in negotiating a contract extension. He is in the final year of a 2-year, $12 million deal that he signed with the Browns last year. So we'll see what his production is going to be like this season if he ends up playing games. He missed a couple of team practices earlier this week anyway. Today he was at practice and participated, so it doesn't seem like he's holding out. But we'll see if he holds out as the season draws closer. So that's kind of your latest from the NFL. Checking in on a few other teams anyway. Roger Saffold is back at Bills practice. He signed with the Bills this offseason. He's going to be their starting left guard anyway for the Bills. He was out due to an injury suffered in a car accident, had broken some ribs, but he is back at Bills practice. The Bills are by far the favorite in the AFC. We'll see if they're able to get that Super Bowl this year. Roger Saffold will be a big part of the reason why, protecting Josh Allen. Of course, the Rams, the Super Bowl champions last year, have lost a couple of pieces this offseason, most notably Von Miller, who signed with the Buffalo Bills that six-year, $120 million deal. So that's kind of the news there. The big news, though, for them is that they're still looking at Odell Beckham Jr. They still have about $8 million in salary space, so that could carve out a nice deal for Odell. Not exactly what he's used to getting, of course, but he is coming off of injury, injured himself playing for the Rams last year. So we'll see if he gets anything better than that. But it seems like they're still far apart on contract negotiations. They did bring in Allen Robinson this free agency period as well. So they already have a number one and a number two with Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. Beckham Jr. would be a nice luxury for this team to have, but it's LA. They like luxury, and Odell Beckham seems to fit perfectly on that roster as a great number two option next to Cooper Kupp. Maybe he'd be the number three with Allen Robinson. But in either event, the Rams seem to be set at wide receiver. If they get Odell Beckham Jr., that's even better for them. News out of the Giants, anyway, is that they are very pleased with how Saquon Barkley is looking so far in the preseason, so far in training camp anyway. He looks very strong, agile. But that's always been the case. Saquon Barkley has never been one to be considered weak or that kind of thing. The injury issue is the big thing for him, and so far he's remained healthy. Will they end up trading him before the deadline this year? Possibly, if they're out of contention. The Jimmy Garoppolo market, kind of circling back to him, there's not really a lot of teams in there. The article, a couple of different articles mentioned that the Giants could go after him if they see themselves hanging around 500 around the deadline, if Garoppolo is still on the 49ers roster at that point, that is. But the main thing the 49ers are hoping for is injuries on other teams that drives up the price for Jimmy Garoppolo, and then a quarterback desperate team out there gives them a pick that they really shouldn't. Think back to the Minnesota Vikings years ago when Teddy Bridgewater injured his leg and they had to go out and get a starting quarterback. The Philadelphia Eagles, anyway, had Sam Bradford sitting there, and they said, hey, we'll give you him for a first-rounder, and they did. Sam Bradford was not worth a first-round pick at that point of his career, but that's kind of what the 49ers are holding out hope for. So let's see what kind of package that ends up going for. Pardon me for just a moment. So that's kind of your latest from the NFL. Going around the MLB right now, with trade deadline is passed, Shohei Ohtani was not moved. It'll be interesting to see this offseason what ends up happening there. He did roll his ankle anyway during the game today, but he's continued playing. Mickey Moniak, the return for Thor at the trade deadline. He had a home run the other day for the Angels. Today, though, he fractured a finger. Looks like he is going to be out for the remainder of the season. Other news around the major leagues, a lot of DFA'd players have now been released. Odubel Herrera and Juris Familia from the Phillies have both been released. Mitch Haniger returned for the Mariners today. He was on the 60-day IL. Great news for the Mariners. They've been decimated by injuries ever since the acquisition of Luis Castillo. They need to right the ship. They've lost a lot of games since the trade deadline, so we'll see if they're able to continue that success. The Blue Jays put George Springer and Tim Meza on their IL as well. The acquisitions of Whit Merrifield and Anthony Bass and Zach Pop really going to have to come through right now, as George Springer is now going to hit the IL. The Cubs released shortstop Andrelton Simmons today. Tyler Glasnow of the Tampa Bay Rays was announced by the GM there that he could return in time before the end of the season from Tommy John surgery. You remember he was the horse in that rotation last year. And, of course, they're going to be careful with his innings. They don't want to push him too fast. But Glasnow, at the expense of his own health last year, finished a couple of games that he really shouldn't have. And that's kind of where Glasnow is coming back. Brantley, the slugger for the Houston Astros, has been out for about 6 weeks now, and there's been no real update. Again, another no update comment from the GM of the Astros. Seems like there's no real timeline for his return. It seems like he might even miss the rest of the season. The loss of Michael Brantley in that lineup is really being felt. They don't really have too many offensive options at that corner outfield spot, especially with the loss or with the poor production from Yuli Gurriel. The one thing that they didn't do at the deadline I thought really would have helped them is acquire a center fielder, Ramon Laureano, Ian Happ. With Brantley missing time, possibly even the rest of the season, that failure to get that outfielder out there really looms even larger. Thank you for all the likes. Appreciate you guys joining us for an inaugural daily update. Kind of going through some of the other news and notes. Alex Kirilloff, the first base outfielder for the Minnesota Twins, is going to be out for the year after suffering an injury. More news from around the NFL. Derrick Henry has been destroying helmets apparently with a stiff arm. The Tennessee Titans tweeting out a short video of Derrick Henry absolutely demolishing a helmet literally just by doing this. Literally, that's all he did, and broke the dang helmet. And apparently this is a regular occurrence at Titans practice, so look out, defenders, for that stiff arm during the regular season. News from the Cleveland Guardians. They have designated for assignment Franmil Reyes. He was one of the key pieces in the return for the Mike Clevenger deal a couple of years ago with the San Diego Padres. He has really hit a slump this year. You saw how badly Joey Gallo was hitting with the Yankees. Well, Franmil Reyes is getting to that territory. His strikeout rate is approaching 40% right now. His walk rate around 5% and average around 218. And so that's why the Guardians just couldn't hold him onto that roster any longer, and they had to make a move. News out of the Indianapolis Colts. Stephon Gilmore is really impressing at Colts camp. You saw him be traded by the New England Patriots to the Carolina Panthers. That defense was a lot better after he got there, and he's wanting to prove that he's still one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. And so far, he's been showing out at camp. Keep an eye on the Indianapolis Colts defense. They have a new defensive coordinator there, so we'll see what kind of success they have. The Juan Soto, the biggest trade in MLB history, went down the other day. Juan Soto, of course, was traded for 6 players at the time. The deal that doesn't get as much pub, of course, was Josh Hader. The day before was traded for 4 players: Taylor Rogers, Denilson Lamet, Gasser, and Ruiz, anyway, the outfielder. 3 major leaguers and a prospect. One of the major leaguers in that deal is designated for assignment almost immediately by the Brewers. Denilson Lamet has been claimed off of waivers by the NL West Colorado Rockies. They should get some use out of him in the rotation, maybe as a long reliever there. But thank you guys again for joining us. Just a couple other news and notes from the day. Nazem Kadri is still on the market in the NHL. That's your one NHL news bit, is that there's nothing really moving for Nazem. He hasn't really taken any visits over the last few days, so his market seems to be waiting until the beginning of the season. News from the Dallas Stars is that they haven't really had much contract talks with Jake Ottinger or Jason Robertson. They're 2 top RFAs that are highly sought after. I wonder if they're hoping that maybe they get an offer at this point. They're hoping maybe a contract offer comes in over $8.4 million, as they would get a hefty package in compensation back if they ended up accepting that offer. But hopefully the Stars will be able to resolve their contract dispute with both of those 2. They are the brightest spots on that roster right now for the Stars. They have to get them back. If not, those draft picks will help, but I hope that they're able to resolve it for the Stars' future. They really deserve that success. Out of the NBA, the New York Knicks and the Utah Jazz are still talking about Donovan Mitchell. Seems like the Jazz are being very persistent in exactly what they want. Look back at the Rudy Gobert trade. They took back short-term deals young players and a ton of picks. The Knicks apparently don't seem willing to do both. They're willing to give up the picks, but not necessarily the young talent, Quentin Grimes, etc., on that roster, Emmanuel quickly. The Jazz are also unwilling to take back long-term deals in return as well. So maybe they'll have to get another team involved, as they're going to have to send out some salary from the Knicks. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to make the deal happen anyway. So looking at Julius Randle, Evan Fournier, players like that, the Utah Jazz want no business of any of those players, and you can't really blame them. The Utah Jazz have a plethora of players that they're probably going to deal before the beginning of the season as well. All of them should fetch at least a decent return. Looking at Bojan Bogdanovic anyway, Mike Conley could be moved, Jordan Clarkson anyway. Malik Beasley. They got a number of guards that they could move before the season begins, but that's kind of where things stand with the Utah Jazz. The Nets are said to be trying out Ben Simmons at center this season. Steve Nash saying so much in an interview today. It seems like they want to envision a Draymond Green type of a role, kind of a pass-first center, somebody who can play that small ball five for them and not be so much of a limitation on offense if they deploy him at the five. The only news of actual note, anyway, from the NBA comes out of the Sacramento Kings. They have actually inked Kent Bazemore to a one-year deal, again rebuilding that guard depth after that big trade they made for Domantas Sabonis at the deadline this past season. So that's kind of your update today. The only other news and notes out of the MLB is that a couple of players were claimed off of the Texas Rangers. Steven Duggar was claimed by the LA Angels. They designated Dylan Thomas for assignment, and Steele Walker was claimed after being DFA'd by the Rangers by the San Francisco Giants. They have a history of getting the most out of failed prospects. Steele Walker had a nice debut with the Rangers this year, but unfortunately due to COVID, that only lasted 1 week, and so the Rangers felt comfortable moving on from him as they didn't really have space for him out there anyway. So hopefully he'll have a good career going forward. Last bit of news today is that the San Diego Padres were swept today by the LA Dodgers. They lost 3 straight games to them. They also lost the finale of their series against the Colorado Rockies. That's a 4-game losing streak now that they have acquired Juan Soto. Fernando Tatis is due back within about a week or so. According to Bob Melvin, he's going to start a rehab assignment in the minor leagues. He's going to play some shortstop and some center field. That's a little bit interesting as he's played the outfield before when returning from injury the past season anyway. We'll see if he sticks in center field long term. I think he's going to play the rest of the season, though, at short. I think they just want to see how flexible he is. If in the offseason they're able to make a play for one of the top shortstops, maybe they move him to center. Something to keep an eye on anyway. That was an interesting note out of the Padres today, but they did get swept by the Dodgers. They need some momentum. Getting Fernando Tatis back will really help that team. But thank you guys for joining us for our daily update. Every day at about 10 o'clock, we'll have our daily update. Should last between 10 and 15 minutes, give you all the latest headlines from around the league. And make sure you subscribe and join us here at The Upside if you haven't already. Follow us on Twitter at UpsideSN. Keep an eye out for the podcast that we'll be releasing on Thursday on Anchor, or wherever you get your podcast from. Anchor will distribute it to wherever you're going to want to listen to it at. And then, of course, we will start our Patreon on Thursday as well. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you guys tomorrow evening.